Hello, this is Michele Trapiche from Artisan Alchemy, and thank you for joining me for my latest video. When I first started working with metal clay, one of the things that scared me to death was, how do I set stones? It can make or break the look of the piece, and I want to show you two easy products that you can use. However, let's just have a look at what traditionally you can use as well that does take a little bit more skill. The first one is setting a stone into metal clay before firing, and in this case you would need a fireable gemstone. This is white bronze clay, and you would make your own bezel setting. Takes some time and skill to do that when you're first learning, to get it to look really nice. You also need to make sure that the stone is set deep enough into the bezel that you've made, so that when the piece is fired, that the clay shrinks and grabs the edges of the stone, keeping it in place. So when you first start, there are lots of different things that can go wrong with this, and also you do need to get a really nice professional look to it. So that's not for everybody when they're starting out. Similarly, another thing that you can use is bezel wire. This is fine silver bezel wire. Absolutely perfect if you've got a stone that you can't fire in place or is an uneven shape. You would cut a length that you need, you would then solder it or fuse it closed. You would then sink that without the gemstone into the clay and then fire it, and then afterwards you would add your gemstone after firing in place. Things that go wrong are if you haven't closed it properly and the seam is somewhere there. Actually, I've just filed it down so you probably can't see it, but things that can go wrong is they can spring open during firing. Or the worst mistake, and I've done this a couple of times when I was learning, is that I didn't put the bezel far enough into the clay so that it partially came out, and that's quite difficult and it can ruin your piece. Also, if you sand the bezel too shallow when you put the stone in, you haven't got enough to grip the stone. So there are lots of things that can go wrong, but this is perfect and a skill that I would suggest you do learn if you want to set stones that are irregular shapes, and I will do a video on that and show you how to solder and how to fuse that at a later date. But let's look at what you can use when you're starting out. Now, these are pre-made bezel cups, and you can purchase these from www.metalclay.co.uk. They are two different products and they come in a range of sizes. So if we look at this one first, this is a flat back bezel that you simply attach paste to, stick onto the pendant or whatever you happen to be making, hold in place, and then you can either set a fireable gemstone at this stage, or preferably set the gemstone after firing. What these are really, really good for is if you want to add resin or gemstone chips or enamel. Because of the flat back, it's encased and nothing runs out. And I just want to show you a pendant that I made using one of these, and this has got gemstone chips in it and resin over the top. But you can see the bezel is really nice and it gives a nice professional finish because of it's perfectly round, and I knew that wasn't going to come out or lift or distort during the firing process. Now, that does come in all different sizes. Let me show you some sample sizes. Here we go. That one I think is 2mm, and it goes up to about 12mm. I haven't got a 12mm one here, but you can see you've got a choice of sizes. At the moment, I think they only come in round. I think maybe you can get them in oval shape, but I haven't used any oval ones. But they are specifically designed for calibrated stones, and that means stones that are of a perfectly symmetrical size, so 2mm, 3mm, 4mm, etc. You can, however, use stones that are not. So let me show you. This is actually a pearl. This is a half drill pearl, so it's got a flat back, and you could actually use those in there. You could attach them in there after firing. So you don't actually have to have fireable or non-fireable gemstones. You just have to have a gemstone that will fit. What I would say is I would always set the stones after firing, because you're never quite sure what stones are fireable or not, and you don't want to ruin your piece by finding it's not fireable after you get it out the kiln. Now, one thing, if you pop your stone into the bezel, the chances are you won't be able to get that stone out of the bezel, and that is so annoying if you have just been deciding what stone you want to use, which one looks better, and you've got a range of stones all the same size. You pop one in and then you can't get it out again. Unfortunately, that happens quite a lot if it's a nice tight fit. Sometimes if you just drop it gently on a surface, it will come out, but a lot of the time it won't. So you're then committed to either using that in a different project or in your project. So to avoid that happening, if we get a bezel that's the same size as this stone here, you just get some household cotton or dental floss, and when you're testing your stones to see whether they fit or not and what they look like, you lay your thread across the bezel, and then you pick your stone up and push it into the bezel. Now you can see I've got the cotton that's sitting underneath the stone, but it's on either side. To get that stone out, to lift it out, I simply just pick up the thread and it releases the stone. And I could try this bezel with as many different stones as I wanted. Even when it's fired, you can still do that. So please don't forget to do that. I have forgotten so many times I can't tell you. So that's that stone. And that's how you would use cabochons, or if you wanted something flat backed. But what if you have a stone that has a pointed coulee at the bottom, like a traditional diamond shape? Having a flat back bezel is no good for that. So Metal Clay sell these. These are ingenious. And they come in packs. Let me show you here. Oh, don't know if you can see them. There we are. They come in packs of 6 pieces and they range from 3 to 8 millimeters. Now the difference here is that if I flip it over, you can see it's got tabs on the bottom, and instead of adding paste and adhering it to your piece that way, you use those tabs as anchor points. So you literally press that down into the clay. Ooh, there we are. Press that down into the clay. Now, because it's got an open bottom and because you've got a pointed stone, the point may well protrude further. And I don't know, let me see if I can show you here. There we go. The point may well protrude further than the tabs. So what I would suggest you do in that instance, I hope you can see that, in that instance, is you press the bezel into the clay, you then press your stone on top to make an indent in the clay underneath. Now, because clay shrinks when it fires, you may find that that indent may need a bit of filing out after firing. Sometimes does, sometimes doesn't. So that's how you would use those. Again, these are perfect for fireable and non-fireable gemstones. Again, I always set things after firing because I just think it's better, because then you know that there are no issues with the bezel and that the stone after firing is going to be perfect as you see it. Sometimes even with fireable gemstones, you put them in the kiln, one colour and they come out a very different colour, and that's not what you want at all. So these are perfect for adding stones afterwards. So how do you add the stone? So let's have a look. First of all, you need a soft surface. This is a sandbag, but you could use a black rubber block, or you could use a folded up tea towel. And I'm going to pretend that we've got a pendant here, and in the middle of the pendant we've got this bezel already fired, and I've just popped a stone in after firing. So I'm all set now to make sure that this stone is going to be captured in the bezel. So I then need something to do that with. I need some tools. Well, you can use one of three things. Here I've got a bezel pusher, which you can buy again from metalclay.co.uk. They're not expensive and they're great and they do a really fabulous job. Or you can use an agate burnisher if you have one. Or if you don't want to spend any money, pop into your kitchen and get a teaspoon. Now you would use the back of the teaspoon, and what you would do, I'm going to demonstrate with the teaspoon because it's just easier, I think. You hold the stone in place, and you do that because you don't want the stone to move around. You then get the back of the spoon and you roll from 12 o'clock over the stone. You repeat the process. You repeat the process at 6 o'clock, then at 3 o'clock, and then at 9 o'clock. And the reason why you do that is because you want even pressure around the bezel. You don't want the bezel to be pleated or for one bit to have an edge sticking out. So by using gentle pressure on 4 edges, it will start to hold the stone in place and centre everything without distorting the bezel. You then need to go at 2 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 4 o'clock and 10 o'clock. And you just repeat that process again until you feel that the edges have encapsulated the stone. And it can take 5 or 10 minutes to do this. And the way that you check whether the stone is in place or not is you get your pendant or whatever it happens to be and give it a shake. If you can hear a rattle, so you'd put it up by your ear, if you can hear a rattle, that means that the stone isn't held in place tightly enough. So you just need to keep going round with whatever you're using to make sure that it's folded over. Now, the way that this works is if you look at a cabochon stone, and I'm going to use this one here, is that a bezel will come up over the side, and typically a bezel needs to go just over the edge where the stone narrows. So if we look at this big stone here, when you're using these bezels, you need to make sure that you can see the line here at the edge of the gemstone, which is the fattest part, that the bezel goes slightly higher than that, because as you gently fold it over, it will grip the stone in place. So whenever you're using these bezels, just make sure that you have enough gripability. It shouldn't be too low and it shouldn't be too high. So if we look at this one here, which is the one that's stuck in, hopefully you can see that it's actually quite a nice depth. And if I was to secure that in place now, that would look really quite pretty in a pendant. To set the faceted back stones, you would do it in exactly the same way. These ones here, you would do that in exactly the same way by just pulling over the edges. I hope you found that useful, and if you've got any comments or suggestions or you have any questions, please put them in the box below. Happy stone setting!